This happened around 10 years ago, when I was around the age of 7. My family's always been one to travel a lot, and therefore, even though I was only 7, I had flown in an airplane more times than I could count. Along with this, I had also become very familiar with our local airport and its layout. This time specifically, we had shown up to our gate around 2 hours early. I remember waiting for around half that time when I had to use the bathroom. I told my parents this, and them obviously knowing I knew the layout of the airport, or at least enough to get to the bathroom, they let me go alone. And so I did. I made the 5-minute walk to the main bathrooms, which should be noted were actually the only bathrooms I knew of. It was around 3 a.m. at the time, and I guess that's when the bathrooms get cleaned, as they were completely roped off, which signified they were closed. I, again being 7 and not the best decision maker, proceeded to aimlessly walk around parts of the airport. I thought I saw a bathroom sign near the end of it, and so I proceeded to walk down it. But when I was maybe halfway down the hallway, I clearly saw a head peek around a corner. It was a man. I instinctively stopped in my tracks. Hey kid, come over here." Without even giving it a second thought, I continued walking down the hallway now towards this man. I honestly at the time just thought it was an employee, and that he was going to direct me to a bathroom I could use. But no, the man explained how he was lost, and needed me to follow him so that I could help him find the right gate for his plane. At the time, I not only trusted and believed him, but I was actually excited at the thought of helping this man. Like I said before, I was familiar with a good portion of the airport, and I guess the thought of being able to help an adult made me feel special. I responded saying I would help him, but that I wanted to let my parents know what I was doing real fast. Not even as a precaution, I was literally just excited and wanted to tell them. I told the guy I'd be right back. As I turned around and started back towards my gate, the guy began yelling at me and told me that we didn't have enough time as his plane was about to leave, but I responded telling him I would be quick. Shortly after exiting the hallway, I looked back and saw the man practically running out of the hallway and down the stairs that ultimately led to the airport's exit. I figured that was that. I thought it was weird, but I never brought it up to my parents, and after finding a bathroom I could actually use, I practically forgot about the whole thing. Fast forward to a couple years ago, and some coworkers and I were talking about weird stuff that we experienced as kids, and that memory just suddenly came back to me. Being a lot older, it only took a second to connect the dots and realize what actually almost went down. It was a really disturbing feeling to only realize how much danger I was in years later. In retrospect, I definitely should have told my parents about it right after it happened, but I just hope the dude didn't try it on any other vulnerable kids like me. A few years ago, I went to the airport to pick up my friend. He had gone out of town for a week or so and asked if I would pick him up when he got back. We were good friends, so I agreed. I got the landing time of his flight, which was supposed to be almost 11 p.m. It was a little late, but I didn't have anything the next morning, so I was fine with it. I ended up arriving at the airport early that night, and his flight hadn't even landed yet. I decided to park and get out to walk around. I never liked just sitting in the car and waiting, and thought it would be more fun to walk around the airport a little bit. When I got inside the airport, it wasn't very busy at all, probably because how late it was. There were still people here and there, but at this hour, not very crowded. I was simply walking down the hallway right after getting inside, when all of a sudden, I got a tap on the shoulder. I looked and saw a man standing right behind me. He had blonde hair, was about 6 feet tall, and wore a t-shirt and jeans. He was smiling and asked me if I remembered him. I didn't recognize the guy at all, and I shook my head. I was trying to think of where or if at all I had seen this guy before, but after a few seconds I was sure that I hadn't. He told me we had gone to school together, and I was pretty sure we didn't. At the time, I had only just recently graduated college, so I wasn't that far removed from my school years. I asked the guy which school he went to with me, and he replied with high school. I went to a pretty small high school, and still I didn't recognize him. I was pretty sure he was lying, but I didn't know why. He asked me if my flight had just landed and asked if I needed a ride or something. I told him no, I was good and I was just picking up a friend. The guy's smile went away, and he then just said all right and then walked away. It was a strange interaction, and I went on with my way after that. I waited for a while and eventually my friend's flight landed. I got a text from him and I walked over to where he would get his checked bag. It took about 30 more minutes for him to get off the flight and get his bag, but finally we were ready to leave. We walked out to the parking lot where I had parked. My friend put his bag in my trunk and I got in the driver's seat. As soon as I did, though, I noticed the guy who claimed he had known me from earlier. He was sitting in a car directly across from me and one spot over. His car was backed into the parking space and so was mine, so he was staring right at me in the driver's seat, but when I saw him, he looked away. My friend then got in, and when he saw me, he asked what was wrong. I told him the story and he thought it was weird, but mostly funny. We saw this guy in the car, and he was now looking down at his lap like maybe he was on his phone. After that, we pulled out and left, and the man did the same behind us. This was slightly concerning and also surprised us. He was driving a blue Chevy Malibu, it appeared, and we left the airport and went on our way back home, all while being followed by this guy. It took about 20 minutes to get back from the airport, mainly on one freeway. We drove all the way down this road until the exit, and the Chevy Malibu following us did the same. I realized at this point that this guy was probably going to follow us wherever we went. I had no idea why, but I decided to pull off and just take a bunch of turns. We were in some random neighborhood about 5-10 minutes away from my friend's place, and we just kept turning down one street after another, all while the guy behind us did the same thing. This continued on for about 15 minutes straight. The guy just wouldn't seem to give up. Eventually, though, finally, the car suddenly sped up and drove past us. When it did, it honked, and the driver, as well as two people in the back seat, all flipped us off and then sped away. After that, I drove back, dropped my friend off, and then went home. I'm not sure who that guy was, why he claimed to know me, or why he followed us. I also don't know who was in the car with him. So many questions I might never know, but I'm glad I haven't seen him since. My dad was working a job in Austin, but my mom was home with me. I had a break in school, so my mom and I decided to fly down to Austin to see him. My mom is a smoker, and me being 10, she didn't want me in the cigar room in the airport, which was basically a glass box full of smoke, so we leave our gate and head down that way. Thankfully, there's a bookstore maybe 10 feet from the cigar room, which also has mostly glass windows, so my mom sends me to the bookstore and sits close to the door of the cigar room so she can see me. Before we parted ways, my mom told me to send her a text message saying, "I really want this book, if I got any hinky vibes from anyone." Well, I'm a reader, so I think I'll look for a while until my mom is ready to get me. There probably won't be any issues. After about 5 minutes of being in this bookstore, I notice a guy walk in. I really only remember his gray suit and black dress shoes. I notice his shoes come over by where I am, the thriller section, so I move away to another section where he promptly follows me again. I assumed it was just a coincidence since I was still looking at more mature books, and move over a few feet to another section where they have books on racks in the middle of the floor rather than on shelves on the wall. The guy moves over to the same rack I'm at, but the other side. My freak meter was going off like crazy, which is rarely wrong. So I do one last thing to test my theory of this guy, and I walk over to the little kids section, like Hungry Caterpillar type books, and the guy follows me again. I'm sufficiently freaking out, so I go back to the thriller section, which is closest to the checkout desk, pick up a random book and text my mom, "I really want this book." Not 2 seconds later, I smell my mom's perfume and hear her say, "Oh, good, you found something." We promptly pay and leave. Once we were away from the store, I told my mom what happened, and she told me she had seen the guy follow me across the store twice and immediately walked over because her freak-o-meter was off the charts. She hadn't even gotten my message because she was already walking over. Before we go back to our gate, we stop at the ladies' room, and I noticed the bookstore guy coming down that hall and silently pointed out to my mom, who went on high alert. After the ladies' room, we head to our gate, where we see bookstore guy sitting 2 seats down from our luggage. So my mom sat me down right next to the plane entrance thing and grabbed our stuff. After we board our plane, bookstore guy is only a couple rows away from us, but we can't really move because, well, it's a plane. Finally, we have a layover midway between Nashville and Austin. I didn't notice the rest of this, but my mom did. The guy got off right behind us and followed us to our next gate. My mom was just pissed at this point and ready to throw down with this guy, but won't because I'm with her. We verify where our gate is and our next plane's ETA and take off to the smoking area, another glass box filled with smoke, where she brought me in with her and smoked the fastest cigarette ever. Apparently, the guy had followed us across the airport to the cigar room and just stood outside waiting. We stopped in a gift shop so I could get my dad a gift and grab a drink, and he followed us there too. Finally, my mom has had more than enough but isn't going to confront him personally because he hasn't done anything or engaged us in a very serious way. So we go back to our gate, where my mom tells the lady by the plane entrance what's been going on since Nashville, and she called security. These two huge security guards come down to our gate and start talking to my mom, who says very loudly and pointing, "That man has been following us since we arrived at the airport in Nashville. He's making us very uncomfortable." After hearing my mom be loud and seeing her pointing directly at him, bookstore guy takes off running, so security called for backup and followed him. Like 2 minutes later, we boarded our plane for Austin without creepy bookstore guy.